My family, who cut ties with me, suddenly asked for investment when I built a successful company. I 35F run a successful tech company in Austin, Texas, one that's now valued at over $500 million. But before I get into the current situation that's making my hands shake as I type this, let me give you some background about my family dynamics and how we got here. I wasn't just an unwanted child, I was a constant reminder of what my parents saw as their biggest mistake. My sister Madison, 45F, was their golden child, their perfect, planned firstborn who could do no wrong. When I came along 10 years later, I was an accident that happened only because my grandparents convinced my already established in their 40s parents to have another child. "We didn't plan for you," my mother would say matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. Her tone wasn't cruel, it was worse. It was indifferent, like commenting on an unexpectedly cloudy day that slightly inconvenienced her plans. My childhood was spent mostly at my grandparents' house. Every morning followed the same routine. My father would drop me off with the keys jingling in his palm, saying to my grandfather, "You wanted her, she's all yours." These words became the soundtrack of my early years, a daily reminder of my status as an unwanted burden. My actual home became my grandparents' house. They picked me up from school, helped with homework, drove me to activities, and made sure I was properly cared for. My parents would collect me late at night, usually looking annoyed at having to make the trip. Throughout my childhood, Madison was the star around which our family orbited. While she lounged on the couch discussing college applications, I sat in the corner doing homework alone. My mother would lovingly pack Madison's SAT prep materials while completely forgetting about my school projects. It wasn't that they were cruel, they simply acted as if I didn't exist. The contrast was particularly stark during holidays and family events. Madison would receive thoughtfully chosen gifts, while I would get generic gift cards or practical items like school supplies. The pattern continued through my teenage years. My mother would spend hours helping Madison prepare for college interviews, while I taught myself coding from borrowed library books. When Madison got into an Ivy League school, my parents threw a massive celebration party. When I got straight A's, they didn't even look at my report card. Their neglect pushed me deeper into the world of technology. It was the one place where merit mattered more than family connections or parental approval. By 16, I was creating small apps and websites for local businesses. The money I earned went straight into a savings account my grandfather helped me set up. One day, he would tell me, "You'll understand that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." He'd wink at me, and for a moment, the weight of being unloved would lift from my shoulders. Then came Madison's wedding. My parents spent over $200,000 on what they called the social event of the season. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a designer dress that cost more than a car. No expense was spared. I was made to help with the preparations but wasn't even included in the main family photos. "It's just that your sister's friends are in them," my mother explained, as if that made perfect sense. Madison married Michael, 46 milliseconds, who charmed my parents with grand business plans and promises of success. They poured money into his ventures, a chain of boutique fitness centers that never opened, a tech startup that produced nothing but expensive lunches, a real estate scheme that left investors angry and lawyers busy. When it came time for college, I had excellent grades and multiple acceptance letters from top computer science programs. But my parents' response felt like a physical blow. "We spent all our savings on your sister's wedding. There's nothing left for your education." I still remember that dinner table conversation with perfect clarity. When I brought up that they had paid for Madison's college, my mother's response was chilling. That was different. We saw potential in her. The silence after those words about potential was unbearable. I left without being excused, my hands shaking as I called my grandmother. My grandparents, though, had been preparing for this moment. "We've been saving for your education since the day you were born," my grandfather revealed, showing me bank statements. They had anticipated my parents' behavior and had quietly built a safety net for me. Looking at those bank statements, I saw years of careful planning, small deposits made consistently, investments managed wisely, all done in secret to ensure my future. Their support allowed me to attend a top tech school and later start my own company. The early days were brutal. Sleeping on a friend's couch, working 18-hour days, living on ramen noodles and coffee. But every small success felt like a victory. My first major contract, my first office, my first team of employees. Each milestone was celebrated with my grandparents, while my parents remained oblivious to my achievements. While I was building my success, Madison and Michael were burning through my parents' retirement savings. Each failed business venture was followed by another sure thing. My parents emptied their accounts, took out second mortgages, and even cashed in their life insurance policies to fund Michael's schemes. "Your sister and her family need our support," they would say whenever anyone questioned their decisions. Now, a decade later, everything has fallen apart. For them, not me. My company has grown beyond my wildest expectations. We're a major player in AI security systems, with clients including Fortune 500 companies and government agencies. I have a beautiful house in Austin's best neighborhood, a thriving career, and the respect of my industry peers. Meanwhile, Madison and Michael's latest business venture, a cryptocurrency investment platform, has completely collapsed, taking their investors' money with it. They've moved back into my old bedroom, the one I spent years keeping immaculately clean while serving as the family maid. Their twins, 10 milliseconds, have had to leave their expensive private school. My parents' company, a once successful manufacturing business, is facing bankruptcy, drowning in debt from supporting Madison's family and their own poor financial decisions. Last week, my parents reached out. They need a substantial investment to save their company. My mother's voice, usually so dismissive when speaking to me, was suddenly sweet and maternal. "We're family," she said, as if those words should erase decades of neglect. My father even called me princess, a term he had only ever used for Madison. Here's where it gets interesting. I've had my legal team quietly investigating their company for months. I've discovered years of questionable accounting, tax evasion, and fraudulent practices. The evidence is substantial: falsified invoices, hidden accounts, unreported income. I have enough evidence to not just refuse to help them, but to actively ensure their downfall. My plan is simple but devastating. I'll pretend to help while systematically exposing their fraudulent practices to their business partners and relevant authorities. I want to watch their carefully constructed world crumble, just as they watch me struggle without lifting a finger. I've already started anonymously sharing information with their major suppliers about their financial instability. My grandparents passed away recently, leaving me as their main heir, another source of bitter resentment from my family. But I think they would understand my actions. They saw how my parents treated me all those years. They watched as I was pushed aside, ignored, treated as less than. Their last gift to me wasn't just their inheritance, it was the strength to finally stand up for myself. Now I sit in my office, looking out over the Austin skyline, holding the power to destroy the family that never wanted me. Some might say this is too harsh, that family is family. But were they family when I needed them? When I sat alone at school events? When I worked as their unpaid housekeeper while Madison pursued her dreams? When they dismissed my achievements and belittled my potential? I have the power now to make them feel what I felt: insignificant, unwanted, desperate. The evidence I have would be devastating if revealed. Their reputation would be destroyed, their social standing annihilated, their financial future ruined. Everything they value would be stripped away, just as they stripped away my chance at a normal childhood. Am I wrong for wanting to use it? Am I the bad person here for planning to destroy the family that never considered me part of it in the first place? Update 1. My plan is moving faster than I expected, and the results are both satisfying and unsettling. The past 3 months have been a whirlwind of calculated moves and unexpected developments. Let me break down what's happened. First, my beloved grandparents passed away within weeks of each other. My grandmother went first, peacefully in her sleep, and my grandfather followed shortly after. The doctors said it was heart failure, but I believe it was a broken heart. At their funeral, I watched my parents and Madison hover around their lawyer, barely concealing their eagerness to hear about the will. The reading of the will was a scene I'll never forget. The lawyer's monotonous voice echoed through the wood-paneled office as he announced that I was the primary beneficiary of their estate, including their historic house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's face turned an interesting shade of purple, while my mother's perfectly manicured nails dug into my father's arms so hard they left marks. My parents immediately contested the will, claiming my grandparents weren't of sound mind. Their lawyer contacted me with a laughably weak case, suggesting that my grandparents had been unduly influenced. What they don't know is that my grandparents had videotaped their reasons for their decisions, documenting years of my parents' behavior and their concerns about the family's financial irresponsibility. Meanwhile, my investigation into their company has revealed more than I initially expected. It turns out my father's manufacturing business has been involved in a complex web of fraudulent activities. They've been systematically overcharging government contracts, using substandard materials while claiming premium quality, and maintaining 2 sets of books to evade taxes. The rabbit hole goes deeper than even I imagined. Madison and Michael's situation has deteriorated rapidly. After moving back into my old room, they've been trying to maintain appearances in their social circle. Madison still attends her country club meetings, now wearing carefully preserved old designer clothes and making excuses about their temporary living situation. Michael spends his days making desperate phone calls to former business contacts, trying to scrape together investors for his next, guaranteed success. Their twins are struggling to adjust to public school. Last week, Madison called me crying about how her boys had to eat cafeteria food instead of their usual organic, chef-prepared lunches. The irony of her distress over her children's suffering isn't lost on me, considering how she never once noticed when I went hungry during my teenage years, because everyone forgot to buy groceries or leave money for food. I've started implementing the next phase of my plan. My legal team has been anonymously feeding information about the company's fraudulent practices to their major suppliers and contractors. The effects were immediate. 3 major contracts have been pulled in the last month alone. My father's desperate attempts to secure new contracts are failing as whispers about their financial instability spread through the industry. My mother's social standing, something she's always prized above almost everything else, is crumbling. Her garden club, where she's been president for 15 years, suddenly had an organizational restructuring that left her without a position. The charity board she served on for decades didn't invite her to their annual gala. Small things, but in their world, these social snubs are devastating. The company's employees are starting to jump ship. Their best engineer, who's been with them for 20 years, just accepted a position at my company, though he doesn't know I'm behind the generous offer. He brought with him detailed knowledge of their technical violations and safety shortcuts, information that will be very useful in the coming months. My parents' attempts to maintain their lifestyle are becoming increasingly desperate. They've started selling their art collection, claiming they're downsizing for retirement. My mother's beloved Mercedes disappeared from their driveway, replaced by a modest Toyota. My father's golf club membership, a status symbol he's flaunted for decades, has mysteriously lapsed. Last week, Madison tried to manipulate me into helping them. She invited me to lunch at what used to be her favorite expensive restaurant, though I noticed she carefully ordered only from the appetizer menu. "You know," she said, stirring her water with lemon, "I always regretted not being a better sister to you when we were young. The twins would love to get to know their successful aunt better." I sat there, watching her performance, remembering all the times she walked past me like I was invisible. How she never once stood up for me when our parents neglected me. How she happily accepted their sacrificing my education for her wedding. "That's interesting," I replied. "I don't remember you regretting anything when you were living in the house I cleaned and eating the meals I cooked." The look on her face was priceless, a mixture of shame and anger that she quickly tried to hide behind a practiced smile. But I wasn't finished. I asked her about her cryptocurrency platform's investors, watching her squirm as I mentioned specific names and amounts. "It would be terrible if someone were to point them towards certain irregularities in the business," I said casually, finishing my coffee. "My father's health is starting to suffer under the strain. I heard from a former employee that he had a minor heart attack last month. For a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt, until I remembered how he used to joke with business associates about his extra daughter, who was only good for housekeeping. The company's bankruptcy seems inevitable now. I've made sure their attempts to secure emergency funding have been quietly sabotaged. Their reputation in the industry is in tatters, their credit rating has plummeted, and their remaining clients are getting nervous. I estimate they have perhaps 2 months before everything collapses." Some nights, sitting in my grandparents' former house, now mine, I look through old family photos. There's a particular one that catches my attention. My high school graduation, where I'm standing slightly apart from the family group, my forced smile not reaching my eyes. I remember that day clearly, how they rushed through my ceremony because Madison had a dinner party to attend. People might say I'm being cruel, that I'm going too far, but as I watch their carefully constructed world crumble piece by piece, I feel nothing but a cold satisfaction. They're finally experiencing what I felt all those years, the slow, inexorable destruction of everything they thought was secure. The next phase of my plan is already in motion. Soon, very soon, they'll learn exactly what it feels like to be truly unwanted and discarded. Update 2. The dominoes I've carefully arranged are falling exactly as planned. These past few months have been a masterclass in watching a privileged family's world implode, and I must admit, orchestrating their downfall has become something of a full-time job alongside running my company. The most significant development came last month when the IRS launched an official investigation into my parents' company. Anonymous tips with detailed documentation tend to get immediate attention, especially when they involve patterns of misreported government contracts and creative accounting spanning a decade. Their 3 biggest clients pulled out within weeks, triggering a mass exodus of both customers and employees. Their company's implosion has been spectacular. The factory floor that used to buzz with activity now stands eerily quiet, machines gathering dust while my father desperately tries to secure new contracts with increasingly disreputable partners. After several delayed payrolls, most skilled workers have left, many coming to work for my company, bringing with them detailed knowledge of my parents' questionable practices. Michael, in his infinite wisdom, tried to launch another venture, a revolutionary AI-driven cryptocurrency platform. What he didn't know was that I had my team create a detailed dossier of his previous failures and bankruptcies, which mysteriously found its way to potential investors. His fundraising meetings now end before they begin. The social fall has been particularly satisfying. Madison had a complete meltdown at the country club when she had to cancel the twins' junior golf memberships. They've been withdrawn from all their private lessons and activities. No more tennis, French tutoring, or equestrian classes. My parents' attempts to salvage their situation have become increasingly desperate. My father showed up at my office unannounced last week, something he's never done in all the years I've run my company. He'd lost weight, his previously immaculate suit looking shabby and worn. The secretary said he waited in the lobby for 3 hours while I was in meetings, just like they were always too busy for my school events. Their asset liquidation has become frantic. The art collection they prized? Sold piece by piece to cover mounting legal fees. My mother's precious antique furniture? Sold to dealers who significantly underpaid, thanks to quiet words from my contacts about their desperate need for quick cash. Their house, their pride and joy for 30 years is now on the market. The real estate agent, carefully chosen by me through intermediaries, has been subtly steering potential buyers away by hinting at serious structural issues. The investigation has revealed darker secrets than expected. They've been falsifying safety inspection reports for years. My anonymous tip to OSHA triggered a comprehensive review of their manufacturing processes. The fines alone will probably finish what's left of the company. Madison and Michael have been forced to move to a small apartment in a part of town they used to mock as a questionable. The twins are sharing a room for the first time in their lives, and Madison can't stop complaining about the noise from the highway and the sort of people who live there. I wonder if she realizes their new apartment complex is actually nicer than the places I lived in while building my company from scratch. My mother tried a different approach recently. A lengthy email about family loyalty and Christian forgiveness, complete with Bible verses and old family photos. Most of the photos were clearly recent edits, my image awkwardly photoshopped into family occasions I was never invited to attend. The local business community has completely frozen them out. There's no longer invited to industry events, their calls go unreturned, and their attempts to secure new investors are met with polite but firm rejections. My father's membership in the prestigious Business Leaders Council has been temporarily suspended, pending the IRS investigation. The most satisfying moment came during a recent industry conference. I delivered the keynote address about innovation and business integrity, watching my father skulk out halfway through my speech about ethical business practices. The local business paper is preparing an investigative piece about their company's decline, their desperate attempts to control the narrative futile against the mountain of documentation I've provided to journalists. Looking ahead, I can see the endgame approaching. The IRS investigation is gathering steam, their remaining assets are dwindling, and their social isolation is nearly complete. Soon, very soon, they'll understand what it truly means to be the unwanted one, the outsider, the person nobody cares about. And I'll be watching it all from my office high above Austin as justice finally gets served. Update 3. The endgame has played out exactly as I planned, and the satisfaction of seeing my family's complete downfall is even sweeter than I imagined. Let me share the final chapter of this story of justice served. The IRS investigation concluded last month, resulting in multiple charges of tax evasion and fraud against my parents' company. My father now faces potential criminal charges, and their remaining business associates have completely cut ties. The company that was once their pride and joy has been liquidated, with most assets seized to pay outstanding debts and penalties. Their social downfall has been absolute. They've been forced to sell their house and move into a small rental apartment in a working-class neighborhood. My mother, who once hosted charity galas, now avoids going out entirely. The society pages that once featured her prominently now publish subtle hints about the family's disgrace. Their fall from grace has become a cautionary tale in Austin's social circles. Madison and Michael's situation has become even more dire. After months of scraping by, they've had to declare personal bankruptcy. The twins have adjusted to public school, though Madison still tells anyone who listen about their temporary setback. Michael spends his days at the local library, using the free internet to send desperate job applications. His reputation is so thoroughly ruined that even entry-level positions are out of reach. The most interesting development came when several of Michael's former investors formed a class-action lawsuit against him. During discovery, evidence emerged of his involvement in multiple fraudulent schemes. He's now facing his own legal troubles, and Madison has finally realized that her perfect husband is nothing but a con man. My parents tried one last time to reach out to me, showing up at my office with a prepared speech about family forgiveness and second chances. The security team, following my standing instructions, politely but firmly escorted them out. As they were led away, I watched on the security cameras as my mother broke down in tears, the same way I used to cry alone in my room after being ignored at family dinners. The final blow came when their church, their last refuge of social respectability, asked them to take a break from their leadership roles due to the scandal. My mother's carefully cultivated image of Christian charity has crumbled along with everything else. The same people who once sought her approval now whisper about her behind their hymn books. Through carefully placed sources, I've ensured that every detail of their fraudulent practices has become public knowledge. Their attempt to play the victims has backfired spectacularly, as more and more evidence of their unethical behavior comes to light. The local business journal recently published a scathing expose using documents that mysteriously found their way to their investigative team. Last week, I received a letter from Madison. She wrote about regret, about finally understanding how I must have felt all those years. She talked about how her twins ask why they can't have the things their friends have anymore, and how it breaks her heart to tell them no. Just like my heart broke every time I was told there wasn't enough money for my school trips or extracurricular activities. My parents have aged dramatically in the past year. My father's hair has turned completely white, and my mother's carefully maintained appearance has crumbled. They were recently spotted at a discount grocery store, arguing over generic brand cereals. The woman who once insisted on only the finest organic produce now clips coupons from the Sunday paper. The investigation into their company revealed even more than I expected. Years of cutting corners on safety regulations, environmental violations, and worker exploitation have come to light. Former employees have come forward with stories of unsafe working conditions and unpaid overtime. Each revelation adds another nail to the coffin of their reputation. My company, meanwhile, has flourished. We've expanded into new markets, and our stock price has doubled. The contrast between my success and their failure has become a popular topic in business circles. Several business schools have approached me about sharing my story of overcoming adversity to achieve success. The twins have started asking questions about their family's history. Through the grapevine, I heard they discovered old photos and documents that reveal the truth about how I was treated. They're at an age where they can understand injustice, and they're beginning to form their own opinions about their grandparents and mother. Recently, I drove past my old neighborhood and saw my father walking alone, shoulders slumped, looking years older than his age. For a moment, I felt a twinge of, not guilt, exactly, but recognition. I remembered the lonely little girl who just wanted her parents' love. But then I remembered all the years of neglect, all the casual cruelty, all the times they chose Madison over me, and the feeling passed. My revenge is complete. Their world has crumbled, their social status is destroyed, and their financial security is gone. They've experienced exactly what they made me feel, what it's like to be unwanted, ignored, and discarded. As I sit in my office, looking out over the city I now help shape, I feel no regret. Sometimes justice takes years to achieve, but when it comes, it's absolute. They created this situation through years of neglect and cruelty. I simply ensured they reaped what they sowed. Their story has become a whispered warning in social circles. Be careful how you treat people, because you never know who they might become. And my story? It's become one of triumph over adversity, of success despite obstacles. No one needs to know the full extent of my involvement in their downfall. Justice, as they say, is best served cold, and my revenge has been absolutely frigid.